Hello, my name is Jason, and I'll be showing you how to style the web application that we've been developing. First, we'll be adding an animated header that we've shown in the introduction, and we'll also demonstrate some basic responsiveness in web design. So we'll get right to making the header the component. So first, we'll make a folder for the component. We'll name it header. And then we'll also make a new file called header.tsx. And as with all the components that we've been making, we're going to import all as React from React itself. And then we'll start by defining the class of the component. We'll call it header component, which extends the React component. We'll have a constructor which passes in a props of any type and call the super of any of our props that are passed in. We'll set a state called refresh, where we'll call set state upon every 3 seconds to refresh the component. So this state equals to refresh. Oh, go. And now we'll create the refresh function, which will actually set the state to an arbitrary integer value. So refresh this dot set state. We want to set refresh to an arbitrary number of 1. So now what we want is when the component is rendered on the screen, we want it to actually call this function. So the function that does that is component did mount. And we want to set an interval. This dot refresh, which calls the function that we just made, and we want to bind it to this specific class. And we want it to call every 3000 milliseconds. So if you all don't really understand what component did mount does, we can refer to the React API. It says here that component did mount is invoked immediately after a component is mounted or when it is actually rendered. So once our component is rendered, it will set our interval of every 3000 milliseconds, and we'll call the refresh function every 3 seconds from then on. Now we'll make a function that actually gives us a random color when we ask for it. So we'll call it update colors. So we'll have a color array, which gives us all the colors in the rainbow, RGBIV. So first it's red, orange, yellow, green, blue, indigo, violet. And we want to return a random color from this array. So we'll index this color array with math.random by the length of the array so that we do not get index out of bounds. And then we want to truncate this integer that we've made to the nearest integer. Now we actually have to make the actual rendering of the component. So we'll call render, return which of the component that we want to return, We may want to make a div for this and call it header so we can style it later. Header. We'll enclose the header in an h1 tag as so. And since we want all the letters to be individually animated and we want them to be displayed on the same line, we'll use a lot of span tags. Let's close the span. So now we have P for pixel. And for the style, we need to call the function that we created here, update colors, to get the color that we want for this particular character. So we do this dot update colors. So we want to call this function. And we want to do this for every character. So we have 6 characters, I believe. So P, I, X, E, L, S. Edit these. So I, X, E, L, and S. So now to top it off, we have to add the rotating pixel. I have an image tag of an alt text of rotating pixel just in case if it doesn't get rendered, and the source will be from our logo, which we will import later. So first we got to import the logo, but we have to add it to our assets folder first. So I have our finished project and we have the assets folder, and we're gonna add it to our folder that we're working in. So now we have an assets folder here, and we must be able to reference it. So import logo from this directory. So we want to dereference the current folder that we're in currently, and then we want to dereference it one more, and we want to go into the assets folder because that's where our pixel is in, and it is called purple pixel.gif. So now our logo should be correctly referenced, and we have to export this class that we've made. So export default header component. So now we have to actually place the component into our project. So go into app.tsx, and we want it to be displayed even while it's loading. Well, first we got to import it. So go import header from component header and the header project. Don't forget our semicolons, and then we want to put that render that component just as so. We'll format the document. Now the header has been added without the styling, as you can see. So now we'll put some styling on it. So with the pixel, we want it to be severely smaller than what we have it is as right now. So give it a height of something like 35 pixels, and that should scale accordingly. But as you can see, it isn't quite aligned properly with our title because it isn't being displayed in the line properly. So we'll also display inline the pixel, and we need to be able to vertically align it along with the rest of the entire component, and we want to make some distance from the title and the pixel itself, so we'll give it some margin as well of something like 20 pixels. That should be enough. So now it's on the same line, and also it is we have created some distance along with our title. So now we actually want to style the banner a little bit so we can actually distinguish it from the rest of the web application. So we'll go into CSS for that. And so we'll reference the header that we created, and we want to align the text into the middle of the page, which we'll do, as you can see, let's align the text in the middle. And we want to give the color a kind of like an off gray so we can distinguish it from the rest of the page itself. We want to create some distance from the header and the actual main body content, so give it some margin on the bottom of something like 20 pixels, and we want to actually have some color in our banner, so give it a padding of 15 pixels respectively. We'll have the header have a minimum width of 600 pixels because the grid that Rashad has created is always 600 pixels, so we want our header to always be as wide as that so it can be displayed proportionally with the grid itself. So now you should be able to see. So this is kind of like an off gray, so you can distinguish it from the rest of the web application, and everything's aligned and there's spacing everywhere, and most importantly our text is being animated randomly with a random color from the rainbow spectrum. So I'll go over how each character is being animated again. So go back into the header component. So when the component is rendered, it will call the setInterval function, which tells the component to call the refresh function every 3 seconds. And then the refresh function will set the state of the state variable refresh to some arbitrary integer. And since setState is being called, it will cause the component to re-render, therefore causing our component did mount to be called again, therefore continuing the cycle over and over again. When the component is being rendered continuously, it will each character will call the update colors function to find a color to animate itself with, and in the update colors function we have an array of colors represented in the rainbow spectrum, RoyGBiv, and we randomly index it to return the color back to each individual character to be animated as. And then therefore we have achieved this random assortment of colors on our title. Now we'll make a simple footer component to kind of illustrate the ownership of the project in itself. So go back and create a new folder for the footer. We'll name it footer, and add a new file called footer.tsx. This is going to be very, very basic. So import React from React as always, and we're going to make a functional component to continue with the theme. So footer, open close bracket with an arrow function, and we want to make a div for class name footer so we can style it later, and just do a simple all rights reserved MSA 2020 with a full stop. Oh, and we have to add a copyright sign, so ampersand copyright after it as well, and we want to export it. After export default of the footer, can't spell. And now we also want to display this on our application, so we go back onto app.tsx and call, first of all we need to import it, so import footer from directories. We need to specify this file that we're currently in, go to components, we'll go specifically to the footer folder and the footer component in itself, and we want to display this component, so footer and it should be shown right here. We'll need to add some CSS to it, so as we did to the header, so that this text is in the correct place. So go back onto app.css. I want to reference the footer. We want to give it some margin so it isn't so close to our main body content, and we want to align the text that is within this tag. So text align center as always, and now it's slightly away from the main body content that we have, and it's also in the middle. Sweet. So now we'll put the information column in to demonstrate some simple responsive web design. So we'll make another component called text, and in here we'll make a file called information.tsx. You should know the usual is now we want to import the React, and then we want to make a functional component to render. Oh, open close bracket, render function, and we want to create a div with an ID so we can style it later for the responsiveness. And in here, we just want some very generic information. So this project is largely inspired by the Reddit r/places subreddit. So Pixels is inspired by the r/place subreddit, and we'll tell the user on how we're going to be how to use it. So to get started, the user needs to select a pixel on the canvas and select a color and press confirm. And then now your edit is visible to everyone. And that should close it off. We probably want to link the subreddit, so we'll make an attribute tag href equals to, so the place is subreddit here, copy and paste the URL in, and then we'll close it, and it's called inside the attribute tag we want to do our place. We also want to embed a YouTube video on the information column to show what the rplace subreddit project actually achieved in the very end. So we'll use the React player component to do this. So in here we want to npm install the React player. So just kill this real quick. So we want to install it, and then we'll also need to import the player. So we'll just wait until this installs first. And okay, so install no problems. So we're going to import the React player from our React-player. Oh, don't forget our semicolons. And we want to put the component in. So the React player component. And once we come into the documentation for this specific component, we can use the URL prop to display whatever media that we want. So we'll go URL, and the URL to the YouTube video is as so. I have it copy and pasted here, and we want the close this component, and we want this width to be as close to our column as possible. Now we're going to export the component itself, so export information. So now we want to display this component that we've made alongside the grid that Rashad made. So we'll go on to the latest grid section that Rashad created, and since we want it to be alongside what Rashad made, we got to make some changes to his component. So add a div to his if statement, and we'll move his grid up. And now we'll add our information, but first we got to import the component that we just made. So import component, dereference our directory, add the correct component, and we'll add the component in along under the grid that was just made, and we'll npm start. Wait for our server to start. Here we go. Takes a little bit. So now here is our information with a very, very, very big video, but we will style this. So how we'll be styling this and adding it alongside the grid itself, we'll be using Bootstrap, React Bootstrap at that. So first we have to kill our local host, and we have to install Bootstrap, install React Bootstrap, so npm install react-bootstrap. So while that downloads, we also actually have to link the style sheet. So we'll link the style sheet, and we must link the style sheet to the index.html. So after the rel link, or format document, we need to link the bootstrap so we can use the styles that have already pre-made. So I'll briefly explain how Bootstrap works. So how Bootstrap works is that they have a grid system which has 12 rows, and each row has 12 columns. You're able to individually assign how many columns each component that you have made will occupy. So one component can occupy 8 columns, and another component can occupy 4 columns for you to kind of have like an imbalanced style. But since we only have the grid system itself and the information that we want to display, we'll have 2 equal columns, both of size 6. So need to put the bootstrap onto the render that we're going to be using. So first we want to import the row system that we're going to be using from React Bootstrap. React Bootstrap /row, and we want to import the column system from React-Bootstrap column .col, and I want to containerize this system here. So container from React-Bootstrap, why is it so hard to type, /container. So first we start off by putting everything that we want to containerize into the container. Encapsulate both these components. We'll give it the fluid attribute. So what fluid does is that when it hits a specific breakpoint in terms of the screen width and the screen size, it will seamlessly transition between each of your individual presets. We want to now put our components onto one massive row. You have row, put the ending here, row, and then each component will be in its own column. So we'll be using the column tag and close this here column, and we'll open up another one for the other component. Why is there this squiggly line here? I don't like that. Let's have a look. Oh, I declared the name wrong. Here we go, that should fix it. We'll format the document. Here we go. So in order to specify the number of columns that each component will occupy, we'll use MD, which stands for medium-sized device. And we don't actually have to specify the breakpoints for each and every device because it will these tags are able to scale up. So this specifies that we want to use 6 columns, and then this also specifies we want to use 6 columns. So now when you go back into our web application, you're able to see that everything has been divided into 2 columns, but it seems as our grid looks a little bit weird, and this is our information column hasn't been properly styled. And in terms of the responsiveness, the interaction is also a little bit weird because the page itself, as you can see when I change the screen width, the information column kind of collides with the grid column. And then as it shrinks, it will collapse on top of each other. This is the type of interaction that we want, but it overlaps on top of each other. That is because the column width is behaving as intended, which is half of the screen width, but because the grid that Rashad has coded, which is in by 600 pixels, and our other column is acting in regards to, so our information column is acting in regards to our grid column. That's why they're overlapping, but our grid is overflowing from our first column. Therefore, you see them being smushed together. And then once we hit the medium device breakpoint, that's when they stack on top of each other. So we will style it accordingly so that they will not overflow. So first we want to put all of our content in the middle. So we have style, justify content in the middle. So wherever it moves, all of our content will be in the center. And in terms of our information column, we want to put everything back in the middle. So we want the text that we wrote to be in the middle. So we have text align center, and then we want to make it we want to make the column to be always as wide as the grid component that we have. So we'll set a minimum width of 600 pixels. So now we need to fix how our grid looks. So by default, Bootstrap gives divs a box sizing of border box. So we will need to change that back to what it is normally. So box dash sizing of content box instead of border box. This should change it. So now the bottom is no longer overflowing. And then we need to overwrite one of the media screen queries that Bootstrap has. So the media screen query looks like this. So the minimum width of 678 pixels. This is corresponding to the medium device, the medium device column that we have created, and we want to overwrite the behavior of the medium device 6 column, and we want to remove the max width behavior back to none, and we want this to take precedence over all other styling, so we give it the keyword important. This is so that the max width of the column is not just 50% of the screen width, which is by default on the medium device col6 behavior. Seems like we need pixels here so the media screen query works properly. So how the media screen query works is that once it is detected that the device width is at least, or is by the minimum 768 pixels, then it will overwrite this colMD6 class property in the CSS. So now when we tab back into our application, we can see that it will dynamically stack on top of each other properly without overflowing. But one thing with this application is as you get smaller, as the screen size gets smaller than 600 in width, it starts to look a little bit weird. That is because this application is mostly intended for just desktop use, and it doesn't actually really work on any mobile device. And because of that, it doesn't kind of work. And additionally, because the grid is always 600 in size, but as you get smaller, or as we make the application smaller, um, the HTML like tag is in actual fact 362 pixels wide, but but the grid itself is still 600. Therefore, it doesn't scale with the other items that are on the web application. Lastly, we'll add some margin onto the information column so that it is not so far to the right, as we can see here. Go back into app.css. And with the information ID that we created for that specific columns div, which is info, add some margin of 0 and probably a quarter, or I mean an eighth of the web page size. And now we save, and now it is not spewing to the right. So one last thing that we need to do is we need to add the link back onto the view historical canvas that Alex did. So from the grid, we'll make a new div, style, and we want to align the text of whatever he added in as to center, and want the margin of 5%, 0 for everything else. What do we have here? Because we haven't closed the bracket, I would assume so. And now we're gonna have to, well, now I must npm install the browser router because I don't have it. So npm install the browser router, and then while we're doing that, we'll have the link component And so where does it go to? It goes to /history, and content would be view canvas, canvas history, and that should be it. npm started again. And we have our view history here, which loads our history of canvases. And that should conclude it for pixels. Thank you all for watching. I hope that you all learned a lot and will be able to create a lot of stunning projects for us. If you're stuck or encounter any issues while developing your projects, please do not hesitate to reach out to us on Facebook or on our dedicated Discord page. Thank you all for watching, and I hope you have a wonderful day.